At 65, Richard thought he had seen it all. A retired architect with a successful career behind him, he'd spent the last 5 years living a quiet, content life in the suburbs. But as the days grew quieter and the evenings lonelier, he realized something was missing. His friends and family often encouraged him to give dating another try, and after much hesitation, he decided to step out of his comfort zone. That's how he found himself sitting in a quaint, upscale cafe on a crisp Saturday evening, nervously waiting for his first blind date in decades. Little did he know this encounter would leave him shocked, confused, and running for the exit. The evening started off innocently enough. Richard, always a gentleman, arrived 15 minutes early. He chose a table by the window, where the soft glow of streetlights cast a warm ambiance. He adjusted his tie, a habit he couldn't shake even in casual settings, and glanced around. A part of him felt foolish. 65 and on a blind date? It sounded like the premise of a sitcom, but his heart told him it was time to take a chance. At exactly 6:30 p.m., she walked in. Sarah, 52, was every bit as elegant as her online profile suggested. She wore a navy blue dress that complemented her auburn hair, and her confident stride turned a few heads in the cafe. Richard stood, offering her a polite smile. "You must be Sarah," he said, extending his hand. She shook it firmly, her grip surprisingly strong, and replied, "And you must be Richard? It's lovely to meet you." They settled into their seats, exchanged pleasantries, and ordered drinks. Black coffee for him, herbal tea for her. Richard found himself relaxing as they talked about their lives. She was a corporate consultant who traveled frequently, and he shared stories from his years designing skyscrapers and community centers. For a while, it felt like a promising connection was forming. But then, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Demand one. You'll have to quit your weekly poker nights." Sarah leaned in, her tone casual but firm. "So, Richard," she began, "I need to be upfront. If we're going to pursue this, I have a few non-negotiables." Richard raised an eyebrow, intrigued but slightly wary. "Go on," he said, sipping his coffee. "Well," she continued, "I believe in spending quality time together. And that means no distractions. I noticed in your profile you play poker every Friday night with your friends. Yeah, that's gotta go." Richard nearly choked on his coffee. Poker nights had been a tradition with his friends for over 20 years. It wasn't just about the cards. It was about camaraderie, laughter, and the shared stories of aging men who found solace in each other's company. "I'm sorry," Richard said cautiously, "but why would that be a problem?" Sarah shrugged. "I just don't see the point of spending time on something so trivial. Wouldn't you rather be with me instead?" Richard was taken aback, but chose to remain diplomatic. "I appreciate quality time," he said, "but those nights are important to me. They're part of who I am." Sarah gave him a tight smile, but her eyes betrayed her disappointment. "Well, we'll see about that," she murmured, leaving Richard with an uneasy feeling. "Demand two. You'll need to adjust your diet for me." The waiter arrived with their food, a hearty steak for Richard and a quinoa salad for Sarah. As they began to eat, Sarah eyed his plate critically. "You're eating red meat?" she asked, her tone tinged with disapproval. Richard paused mid-bite. "Yes, I enjoy it," he replied. "Is that a problem?" Sarah set down her fork. "It's not a problem for me," she said, "but if we're going to be together, I'd prefer you adopt a healthier diet. I'm vegan, and I'd want my partner to align with that lifestyle." Richard felt his jaw tighten. He had nothing against veganism, but he had spent years cultivating his love for cooking and enjoying a variety of cuisines. The idea of giving that up felt stifling. "I respect your choices," he said diplomatically, "but I've been eating this way my whole life. It's part of my routine." Sarah sighed. "Routine can be changed," she said matter-of-factly. Richard felt a twinge of irritation but chose to stay calm. He reminded himself that compromise was a part of any relationship. However, the rigidity of her tone made him uneasy. "Demand three. I expect you to travel with me constantly." As they moved on to dessert, Sarah brought up her career. She spoke passionately about her job, which required her to travel frequently. "I love my work," she said, "and I'd want my partner to join me on my trips. We'd get to see the world together." Richard smiled politely. "That sounds exciting," he said, "but I've always been more of a homebody. I enjoy traveling occasionally, but I also love the comfort of home." Sarah's expression turned serious. Richard, life is too short to stay in one place. I'd need a partner who's willing to adapt to my lifestyle. Richard felt a pang of unease. While he admired her adventurous spirit, he couldn't imagine uprooting his life to chase an endless itinerary. He loved his quiet mornings on his porch, his community events, and his time with his grandchildren. I think it's wonderful that you love to travel, he said carefully, but I value the life I've built here. It's important to me. Sarah's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. You might be surprised how quickly you'd grow to love it, she said, her tone leaving little room for argument. Demand 4. You'll need to sell your house and move to the city. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly. One last thing, she said. I live in the city, and I don't see myself ever moving to the suburbs. If we're serious, you'd need to sell your house and relocate. Richard's heart sank. His home wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary. It was where he had raised his children, where he had spent countless evenings tending to his garden, and where he felt most at peace. I'm not sure I could do that, he said honestly. My home means a lot to me. It's part of who I am. Sarah's expression hardened. Well, I don't see how a relationship could work if we're living in two different worlds. Richard felt a chill run through him. The warm ambiance of the cafe seemed to fade as the weight of her words settled in. He realized then that this wasn't a partnership. It was a list of conditions. The decision. As Sarah excused herself to take a call, Richard sat alone at the table, staring at his half-empty coffee cup. He thought about the life he had built, the values he held dear, and the freedom he cherished. He realized that compromising on these things would mean losing himself. When Sarah returned, she found the table empty. Richard had left, leaving behind enough cash to cover the bill and a note that read, "You deserve someone who aligns with your vision. I'm just not that person. Best wishes." Richard walked out into the cool night air, feeling a mix of relief and clarity. He had stepped out of his comfort zone, and while the date hadn't gone as planned, it had taught him an important lesson. A relationship should enhance your life, not demand that you give it up.